Hello, I'm shattered. Just got in from playing the usual. So I've made myself a Slurpee and I thought I'd have a little sit down. And just when I thought the series, my thoughts, was coming to an end, got a couple more in, which three. I got three in, and I decided to do two of the three. So we do one now. We'll have a Slurpee and probably roll a fag and breathe heavy. It was quite windy, and on the way back I just facing the wind, you know, it took the breath out of me. But anyway, whatever. We're alive still. So these are going to be both from Rachel, so the second video I'll do in a bit. So Rachel says, my thoughts on the importance of travelling, and do you think it is important for spiritual growth? My thoughts on the importance of travelling. Well, first of all, I have to say that some people love where they're living, and if that works for them, that's it. And some people never ever leave their village, their town, their city, whatever. And I'm not knocking them, because if it works for them, it works for them. You know, there's no problem. Who says you have to travel? However, these are my thoughts for me. So, in my life, yeah, I think travelling has been a big thing in my life, really, you know. Nearly all my cars, I mean all my cars bar the one I've got now, I've slept in, and I've gone off with a loaf of bread and a lump of cheese sometimes, and disappeared for a week, you know. I've slept in my car in so many places, all over the country really. And then obviously I travelled, I had Ishi, so that became my bedroom on wheels. So that took me as far as the Isle of Skye, down to Devon and Dorset, across to Rendlesham and Ipswich and Norfolk, and across that way to Liverpool, to Wales, to Preston, and obviously one of my favourite places in the world is Cumbria, Lake District. So it took me all over. For me, I think travelling is very, very important. I think for me, to get to know new areas, to get to know new people, have a different view. You get a different vibe from people and a different opinion, and there's something magical about just travelling, just being free. It brings such a change to you, particularly, you know, living in a motorhome where I didn't know where I was going to be from one day to the next. That worked for me 100%. I loved it. Didn't really make plans. I made plans sometimes if I was going to meet a friend or whatever I was going to do, but the best times was when I literally woke up in the morning, got myself washed and dressed, turned the key and drove. 20 miles, 250 miles, 500 miles, made no odds to me. I would just go and go and go, and I thought, this will do, you know, this is where we're going to live for the week. And that was it. And I loved it. And then things happen there, you know, little mini adventures or experiences or people that you meet, or just places that you wouldn't ordinarily see. You did say about spiritual growth on there. So your question was thoughts on importance of travelling. I feel for me it's very, very important, or has been in my life. Do you think it is important for spiritual growth? Yeah, I do. I think whatever you can do is very good for your spiritual growth, you know, because obviously I've just said, you get a rounded view, you get to meet so many people and have so many different experiences and so many different ideas that come from these people to you, or their opinions and their thoughts. their way of being, their way of living sometimes. You know, is 100% totally different to the way that I was living. But I soaked it up, I was fascinated, you know, and maybe they enjoyed chatting to me as well. The big thing with the spiritual growth when you're travelling is you've got so much time to internalise things. Nobody disturbs you, nobody knows who you are, what you're doing, so you can meditate, you can read, you can go to sleep in the afternoon, you can do whatever you do. But you get to know yourself on such a deep, personal, inner level that you could never normally do in your usual life. You know, your usual life involves, I don't know, whatever, the neighbours popping in, or work, or if you've got children, obviously they're about, or friends, or the internet or the phone will be going, or there's all this stuff that goes around you. It's just life, it's your life, but there's a lot of stuff whizzing around all the time. Going through a kind of an awakening process, a spiritual awakening process, you do need to step out. You've got to step out of that, really. I think it's absolutely impossible to become fully spiritually awake while you got all that lot going on, while you continue your life. I've met a number of people that I would class as spiritually awake, and they have stepped out of their life. I stepped out of my life, they stepped out of their lives. I don't know anybody that continued their life and become kind of totally aware and totally awake. I don't know anybody that did that. So yeah, I think on a spiritual level, it's great. I mean, it's just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing to travel. Wonderful thing. We are travellers. All of us are travellers, you know. Many years ago, you know, your ancestors, my ancestors, they would have just travelled. Of course they would have, you know. And going back, you know, to a Stone Age man, a Neanderthal man, whatever you want to call it, you know, they would have travelled where the water was, where the food was, and they would have just kept moving and moving and moving. You know, I trace my, I'm a part-time genealogist, so I trace my family tree to a wedding in 1573, and it was quite fascinating, really, because the guy who was called Richard, he was a journeyman carpenter. And I didn't know what journeyman carpenter meant, but journeyman carpenter is a travelling carpenter. So they didn't have a home. They obviously lived in some sort of a bow wagon or something, you know, I don't know what they lived in. And he travelled to where the work was. So he was a journeyman carpenter. And you can have journeyman lots of different things. You can have journeyman butler or journeyman cleaner, I suppose. You know, you just travel to wherever the work is. So you didn't necessarily have a permanent bricks and mortar home. You know, it's a fairly modern concept that we... It's funny, isn't it? We link up in these little tiny places, you know, and we feel secure because we've got more roofs around us. But yeah, so we would have travelled years ago, definitely. And I think that was not important for them. It was a necessity. They had to do that. So that will have been handed down in our genes, in our makeup, in our way of being. And somehow, slowly, we've let go of that. But when we step back into it, like I did, like a lot of people do, God, you just realise you've connected with your ancestors just by travelling. It's a fascinating thing, really. So, do I think travelling is important? I do. Now, I haven't done it extensively. A lot of people, particularly if they're Buddhist or whatever, they might travel to Bali or Peru or China, perhaps, or Tibet or Vietnam, Venezuela, wherever. And that's wonderful, because then you see the the true Buddhist, if you like. You see how they live, you go to their temples, you meet people and you experience things. That's absolutely wonderful. And I know if I would have done that, I would have come back a completely changed person, but I've just never done it. If you look at somebody like Ram Dass, who was a professor, and he went to India, and he came back a changed person, totally. Same as Krishna Das, you know, again, highly educated, following the work path and the buying the house and all the rest of it. They went to India, their whole life has changed. So yeah, spiritually it can change you a lot, but I think just travel in general changes you. Meeting people that you would have never normally met, you know. I've met people because I was traveling, and I've got wonderful friends, you know, lifelong, wonderful, glorious friends. I would have never ever met them had I not been traveling, but obviously they would have never met me had I not been traveling and done the YouTube videos. So it's important on so many levels, you know. The places that I went to, I never would have went to, most of them. Certainly the people that I met, the travellers that I met, and just the odd people dotted around the country, you know. Yeah, I would have never met these people. Bloody hell. Did you hear that? Fast motorbike, that's unusual. Wow. So yeah, travel. You know, I've always said that you're not a tree because, you know, a tree remains just in one place and its environment changes around it. And that's kind of how I am now, is that now my environment is changing around me. You know, I will see the seasons living here. I will see, you know, different light at different times of the day and different cloud formations and patterns and different stars. And, you know, it's going to be autumn soon, so I'm going to be sat here watching the leaves change, and it'll be winter, and we may have snow or wind or ice or rain or whatever. So my environment will now have to change around me, rather than me changing around my environment, if you like. I've loved it. I miss it, but I've loved it, and I've done it. So my advice to anybody, get out there, travel if you want to. Take care then. Thanks, Rachel, and be well. Cheers. Ta-ra then.